Willie and Martin handcart companies started out too late in the season. Halfway across Nebraska, they stopped for more provisions and repairs. They could have waited out the winter and begun their trek again in the spring, but they decided to push on. For the most part, they were city dwellers and not prepared to face the harsh frontier.
I can remember of being at a meeting one night when Brother Levi Savage, a returning missionary, arose and spoke. He counseled the old, weak and sickly to stop until another spring. The tears commenced to flow down his cheeks, and he prophesied that if such undertook the journey at that late season of the year, that their bones would strew the way. George Cunningham, Willie Company.
The decision was put to a vote of the people. Filled with enthusiasm, the emigrants voted to continue their journey. Nearly 100 dropped out of the two companies. The rest pushed on.
Brethren and sisters, what I have said I know to be true, but seeing you are to go forward, I will go with you, will suffer with you, and if necessary, I will die with you. May God in his mercy bless and preserve us. Levi Savage.
When the autumn rains turned to early snows, it was too late to turn around. Soon, hope was all but abandoned. Still, they tried to carry on.
No one sang, no one talked. Folks just pushed along at their own pace and tried not to think of how the days and nights stretch into weeks and months before the last of them found a long sleep in the trench of snow. John Jacks, Martin Company.
When morning came, Father's body, along with others who had died during the night, were buried in a deep hole. Brush was thrown in and then dirt. A fire was built over the grave to kill the scent, to keep the wolves from digging up the remains. I can see Mother's face as she sat looking at the partly conscious group. Her eyes looked so dead that I was afraid. She didn't sit long, however. When it was time to move out, Mother had her family ready to go. She put her invalid son in the cart with her baby, and we joined the train. Our mother was a strong woman, and she would see us through anything. Lolita Dixon, Willie Company.
Men whom I'd known all the way from Liverpool, who had been true as steel in every stage of our journey, who in their homes in England and Scotland had never known want, whose hearts were cast in too great a mould to descend to a mean act or brook dishonor. Such men as these came to me and begged bread. Cold weather, scarcity of food soon produced their effects. Our old and infirm began to droop, and they no sooner lost spirit and courage than death's stamp could be traced upon their features. Life went out as smoothly as a lamp ceases to burn when the oil is gone. John Chislett, Willie Company.
Upon hearing of the plight of the handcart pioneers, Brigham Young rose at October General Conference and rallied the saints to again gather in the poor.
Franklin D. Richards and his associates, who were traveling in a light buggy with good teams, came in on Saturday and reported to Brigham Young, and on Sunday morning he stood before the congregation in the tabernacle in Salt Lake City and said that his sermon for the day would be the people out on the plains, caught in the snows. He dismissed the conference and told the people to go to their homes, the women to gather blankets and food and other things, the men to get their teams in order and their wagons. He wanted good, fast teams to move just as quickly as they could out to these beleaguered peoples on the highlands of what is now Wyoming. They were scattered all across that state, from Casper to the east, to the Continental Divide to the west. when they were found.
Wagon teams loaded with food and bedding left immediately to rescue the stranded handcart pioneers.
Tuesday, October 7th. About 50 men and 24-horse wagons with 10 ton of flour with other provisions and clothing left the city. Reddick Newton Allred, rescue party.
This was a severe day. The wind blew awful hard and cold. The ascent was some 5 miles long and some places steep and covered with deep snow. They became weary, sat down to rest, and some became chilled and commenced to freeze. Levi Savage, Willie Company.
It took 14 days to reach the Willie Company, stranded near Rocky Ridge. More wagons rode on to reach the Martin Company.
As we looked ahead, lo and behold, we saw a wagon coming, and it was close. Such a shout as we raised in camp I never before heard. It came from the hearts of the faithful saints who felt their lives was in the hands of their God. Joseph B. Elder, Willie Company.
The brethren turned over to me flour, potatoes, onions, and a limited supply of warm clothing. Quilts, blankets, buffalo robes, woolen socks. That evening, for the first time in quite a period, the songs of Zion were to be heard in the camp. The change almost seemed miraculous. Among the brethren who came to our succor were elders W.H. Kimball and G.D. Grant. How bravely they worked to bring us safely to the valley, to the Zion of our hopes. John Chislett, Willie Company.
Rescuers found the handcart pioneers of the Willie Company strung out for miles. They picked up one load of immigrants who could walk no farther, brought them to camp, and then went out on the trail for more. Still, one morning, 13 were dead in camp. 2 more died during the day. Many in the rescue party pressed on to assist the other stranded companies.
The passage of the Sweetwater was the worst river crossing of the expedition.
You are youth of the noble birthright. You may not at this time know what that means. It means that behind you are great men and women who did wonderful and brave things. They made decisions that were not easy to make, and in many cases they paid a terrible price for those decisions. Some of them even giving their lives rather than forsake the truth they had embraced. I should like to tell you of 3 18-year-old boys. In 1856, more than 1,000 of our people, some of them perhaps your forebears, found themselves in serious trouble while crossing the plains to this valley. Because of a series of unfortunate circumstances, they were late in getting started. They ran into snow and bitter cold in the highlands of Wyoming. Their situation was desperate, with deaths occurring every day. President Young learned of their condition as the October General Conference was about to begin. He immediately called for teams, wagons, drivers, and supplies to leave to rescue the bereft saints. When the first rescue team reached the Martin Company, there were too few wagons to carry the suffering people. The rescuers had to insist that the carts keep moving. When they reached the Sweetwater River on November 3rd, chunks of ice were floating in the freezing water. After all these people had been through and in their weakened condition, that river seemed impossible to cross. It looked like stepping into death itself to move into the freezing stream. Men who had once been strong sat on the frozen ground and wept. as did women and children. Many simply could not face that ordeal. And now I quote from the record. 3 18-year-old boys belonging to the relief party came to the rescue. To the astonishment of all who saw, they carried nearly every member of the ill-fated handcart company across the snowbound stream. The strain was so terrible and the exposure so great that in later years all the boys died from the effects of it. When President Brigham Young heard of this heroic act, he wept like a child and later declared publicly that act alone will ensure C. Allen Huntington, George W. Grant, and David P. Kimball an everlasting salvation in the celestial kingdom of God, worlds without end. Great was their heroism, sacred the sacrifice they made of health and eventually of life itself to save the lives of those they assisted. To be true to that great inheritance, true to the faith that our parents have cherished, true to the truth for which martyrs have perished, to God's command, soul, heart, and hand, faithful and true we will ever stand.